Good to get back here with Danny West from 24/7 Sports. You follow it at HawgSports.com. And always fun to have him on the show here today. Danny, how are you on this Friday? One day before spring scrimmage.
I'm doing pretty good, buddy. We're in the middle of a pretty busy run here in recruiting, but I'm doing pretty good. I'm looking forward to wrapping this day up and listening to you on the radio later on.
I'm looking forward to an hour earlier than we had originally thought to do at 5 o'clock. That's right.
So fine by me.
Tomorrow, man, I feel for Coach Pittman and his staff. You know, I've heard him talk about, like, the players apparently don't like the turf for the indoor facility right now, so they've been practicing in Razorback Stadium. Makes me think that even with the rain tomorrow, and it's going to be raining during the scrimmage, they're going to stay outside. So does that mean that I counted 25 players that are visiting on your column on HawgSports? Man, they better bring ponchos with them.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they approach that myself. It'll be a lot more than 25, I can tell you. I try to list the most notable. You know, everybody's into the stars nowadays, Phil. That's a big thing. So try to put all the 4s and 5s on there that I could. But, yeah, big group coming in, man. Let me tell you, Phil, just as a general observation, I've been really, really impressed. Now, there's a difference between getting kids here and actually getting kids. Y'all know that. But I've been super impressed by, just the sheer quantity of big-time players that they've been able to bring in here. Now, again, you got to go try to seal the deal on them, but it just makes me think back to a former staff member, not under Chad Morris, so don't kill him on Twitter, but years ago, I had a staff member tell me, you're just hardly not ever going to see us bring in big-time players from several states away. We're too hard to get to. Kids aren't willing to, pay their own dime and come here for an unofficial visit. And I thought it was a red flag for me personally, but I keep thinking about that. Every time I see a 5-star quarterback, Jaden Rashada, a 4-star running back, Cedric Baxter, coming from Orlando, and Rashada coming from California, boy, it makes me think back on that and just kind of laugh in my head, because they're proving them wrong right now. Kids will come to Fayetteville, and that's evident again this week.
Do you think that there's any idea to legitimacy to this thought with the transfer portal? And we're seeing players, starters in some cases, from established SEC teams, national champions in some cases, choose Arkansas. Thinking about McLaughlin, thinking about Brini, thinking about Drew Sanders coming to play at Arkansas. You would never think that players that choose to go to those schools would then decide to go to Arkansas. So do you think that has any reflection to the high school recruits? If they're seeing guys that are 5-stars that have had some success with places like LSU and Georgia, that they're looking at Arkansas like, yeah, I can fit in there too.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. I would say Twitter is a really, really big deal, probably more than anybody ever thinks about. But kids are on Twitter nonstop, and Instagram and whatnot. But when they see over and over again Arkansas having success going in and in the transfer portal and bringing out these big-time stars, former 5-star type players like Sanders and Hazelwood, yeah, that catches their attention. It probably, more than anything, makes them go, hey, what's going on over there? And should I check into it? And it's so much easier. Here's the kicker. It's so much easier when you're winning games. Yeah. Like we've seen Chad Morris a few years ago. He had quite a bit of momentum going. At the time, per Arkansas standards, they were on an uptick. That 2019 class was really good. Give him all the credit in the world. But when you attach wins to it, too, and you've proven on the field that you can go out and compete with the SEC standard, then that's the turning point for a lot of these kids. And obviously having a well-liked staff, a well-respected staff sure helps you. But that's kind of the gist I get from talking to the kids, is that, more than anything, up front they believed that Sam Pittman was going to accomplish this turnaround, and he went out last year, or they went out last year and kind of put their money where their mouth is.
And we knew that Chad Morris had a really good class coming in. You would talk about like momentum, and these things have to work together. Regular season success and off-season recruiting success have to work together, and that never happened under Sam Pittman. And so, there's this thought of 4 recruiting classes to build up the depth that you need to really be like one of the major teams in the SEC. How many cycles away do you think Arkansas is from having that kind of depth, especially at positions like defensive line, like linebacker, like offensive line?
Well, I'll start with that. I think defensive line might be where they've got the most improvement to make. In terms of depth, you look around the league at some of these other teams, LSU, Auburn, A&M, you keep naming them, they've all got more talent and more depth at the defensive line spots than Arkansas does, and it's been that way for a while. I will say they're getting the right guys on campus. When you think about Caden McDonald, big-time kid out of Georgia, 4-star guy, huge kid. He can go to Georgia. He can go to Auburn, Florida State, wherever he wants to go, but I think Arkansas is going to be a hat on the table, at least by the time he gets ready to decide. They brought in several more 4-star guys in this cycle, but I'm taking the long way around it there. I think offensive line is probably ahead of the linebacker and D-line spots that you mentioned there. But, probably, well, I think this class is going to have a really good shot to be a top 15. So if you were to kind of project it to next year, if you can do that again, now I think you're talking. So maybe a couple more classes here, and you're on your way.
Let's talk quarterback here for a moment. I know that the Razorbacks lost Lucas Coley to the transfer portal, and so that makes Cade Fortin essentially the third stringer right now, and Malik Hornsby the backup. And I know we've reading Trey Biddy's accounts that he and KJ Jefferson have hooked up on some deep routes quite a bit in recent practices. You mentioned Jaden Rashada, 5-star quarterback from Pittsburgh, California. Pittsburgh with no H at the end of it. With Coley gone, does this open up the door for a 5-star like Rashada to potentially come into the program and maybe end up being like a guy maybe after Malik?
Sure. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and it's something that they've thought about for a long time. Last year they didn't sign a quarterback in the 2022 class. So in December and February they chose not to take a quarterback, and their thinking, I think, was let's create a gap there. There's going to be a good chance that KJ gets out of here. If he duplicates what he did last year, I'd say there's a really good shot that he's going to move on. I think we're all aware of that. And now, you reset the board at that page. You've got one scholarship guy on campus to compete with now that Lucas has chosen to go into the portal there. So I think their thinking was that's going to be really attractive to the higher caliber guys, maybe the option of potentially going into an SEC school and having an opportunity to even start as a freshman. So do I think they're going to be able to pull that off, Phil? I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of Pac-12 flavor. Miami is a player for Rashada, and I keep going back to a guy named Malachi Singleton out of Georgia. We've got him as a 4-star. I know the composite rankings have him as a high 3-star. But, man, let me tell you, I think we've got it right. I think he's a 4-star, legit guy, huge kid, 6'1", 225. He looks awesome. If you watch his film, man, I think there's some comparisons there to be made with the KJ Jefferson. So I think that excites fans, and Malachi will be back next week for an unofficial visit. So he was here March 5th. Felt like they were in really good shape coming out of that visit. And now he's coming back again next week. He's probably, if I had to make a pick, probably the one to watch at this point.
That's the kind of quarterback that obviously with KJ, that's what you got. But is that really what you think Kendall Browse views as if you could build a quarterback for this offense, someone with that size, that running ability, and that arm? And they don't all grow on trees, but if you've already had success with one kind of quarterback just like that, and you're Malachi Singleton and you're the same kind of player as KJ, like it seems like it'd be a really good fit with Kendall Briles in this group, right?
Yeah, buddy, I think he's the perfect fit, honestly. And, on our profile pages on 24/7 Sports, for a big-time guy, 4- and 5-star guy, they offer a scouting report. There's a little section on this page, and one of our national recruiting analysts will give a detailed, very thorough evaluation of this guy. And if people want to go on there and check out Malachi Singleton's evaluation, I think you'll perk up a little bit because it sounds exactly like KJ. It sounds exactly like Kendall Briles and what he looks for in a quarterback. And I thought it was no coincidence, really, I guess you would say, that Malachi's first visit here was against it was Arkansas's game against Mississippi State last year. And if you'll remember that game-winning drive that KJ led them on, and he did some things there that he just created on his own. When they got down there to the goal line or inside the 10 and he's running around, people are bouncing off of him. I see a lot of that in Malachi. So a lot of comparisons to be made there.
The offense for Kendall Briles leads to the quarterback's ability to freestyle in that sense. Like these kids like the ability to have that freedom that if they need to, and it's one of their skill sets, that to put that ball down and run. Like these kids have to love that.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's a confidence boost, you know. I'm sure there's been times in games that KJ just kind of, he draws it up himself. Maybe something doesn't go quite right, and he'll tuck it and go. And, you know, that seems to work out well for him. And it certainly helps when you can run and be a physical runner. You know, I think so many times we think of a dual-threat quarterback as, you know, just a speed guy, a Malik Hornsby, which is great if you can run like Malik, but not everybody can. But if you bring that physical element, I think that's really what set Arkansas over the top last year. I mean, you got to deal with enough with Rocket, Dominique Johnson running straight at you, and now your quarterback's even bigger, and he can do the same things. That's tough to deal with.
I want to touch briefly before we let you go, Danny, on the other side of the ball, and a couple of players that are with the team right now that I keep hearing about from Sam Pittman and from Barry Odom at the linebacker position, and that's Chris Paul and Jordan Crook. Crook is a true freshman, if I'm not mistaken,
right.
and yet they're talking about big things from. We never hear about like freshman linebackers getting a lot of playing time too often here.
Right. Yeah, I think there's going to be a shot of that. I think they're really happy with Chris Paul. You know, last year, had you not returned all three of those guys, Hayden and Grant and Bumper, he probably could have helped you out, you know, as he grew into the system late down the stretch there. We started hearing really good things about him then. So he's huge. He looks like $1 million, and they're certainly high on him. You throw in Bumper and Drew Sanders, now you're off and running. That's a pretty athletic, experienced group for the most part. And then Jordan, was it Jordan you asked about? Crook?
Yes, Jordan Crook.
Yeah, he was a big-time kid coming out of Duncanville, which, you know, obviously I cover recruiting, and Duncanville just pops up on my timeline all the time. I mean, they've got dudes everywhere going to all these different schools, and yet Arkansas hadn't had any success there in a long, long time. In fact, I think he was the first one in the online rankings era to sign with Arkansas out of Duncanville. So, you know, it could be a trendsetter there if you can break into that school. Now you're talking, but they've been impressed with him. He was a high 3-star, a lot of options coming out of high school. I think a lot of people probably, if anything, what kept him from being a true 4 was his height. He's not the tallest guy, which we've seen at Arkansas doesn't always mean much. You know, when you think about Tony Bua, Grant Morgan, some of those guys, Ola Jabutu back in the day. So some of Arkansas's best have been shorter guys, prototypically speaking, and I think he's going to have a really good shot. Now, Manny Powell is another true freshman that enrolled early. Obviously, he tore his ACL last year, so a little bit behind there, but I think he's going to have a real shot to impress, too, once he gets fully healthy.
Danny, we'll let you go with that. Always appreciate your expertise, especially in the middle of a really busy time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
You got it.
BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs, sports info, and odds. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's odds for the Masters Championship and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so join today. Learn why everyone is saying BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on popular sports and games. BetOnline, where the game starts.